Mr. Tall was very, very tall, quite the tallest person you ever met. In fact, quite the tallest you've never met, because you've never met anybody with long legs as Mr. Tall, have you? Now, the problem with being as tall as Mr. Tall was that life was just one long problem, as you can see.
Oh dear.
He used to sigh.
Oh dear. Oh dear me. I do wish that my legs weren't quite so very, very long.
He decided to go for a walk to think over his problems. He was just stepping over a tree when he heard a voice, a little voice.
Hello?
Mr. Small, standing underneath a daisy, but Mr. Tall was so tall that he couldn't see him. So Mr. Small shouted at the top of his voice.
Hello?
A Mr. Small shouted, "It's about as loud as a bee's sneeze." So it took quite some time for Mr. Tall to spot him.
Oh, it's you.
He said gloomily.
You don't look very happy.
Said Mr. Small.
What's up?
I'm not.
Lied Mr. Tall. Because of these silly long legs of mine.
Oh.
Said Mr. Tall. Mr. Small decided to cheer him up.
Let's go for a walk together.
So they did, which, of course, didn't work. It was like a giraffe going for a walk with a mouse. Then Mr. Small had an idea, which did work. And because of the legs of Mr. Tall, they very quickly walked all the way to the seaside.
Come for a swim.
Replied Mr. Small.
Can't.
Replied Mr. Tall.
By the time it gets steep enough for me to swim, I'll be out the other side.
So Mr. Small went for a swim, while Mr. Tall sat down with a face which was nearly as long as his legs. Mr. Tickle came along.
Hello. You look as if you need cheering up. Care for a tickle?
No thanks. What I would care for some different legs. Mine are much too long.
So are my arms. But all the better for tickling.
And off he went, chuckling and looking for somebody to tickle. Looking for anybody to tickle. Mr. Nosy came along.
Cheer up. You look very down in the mouth.
He said.
What's the problem?
It's my legs.
Replied Mr. Tall.
They're too long.
So's my nose.
Replied Mr. Nosy, laughing.
But all for the better poking into other people's business.
And off he went, looking for something to be nosy about. Looking for anything to be nosy about. Mr. Greedy came along.
Hello. What's wrong?
He said.
It's my legs. They're too big.
So is my tummy, but all the better for filling with food.
And off he went, licking his lips. Mr. Tall sat there and thought about Mr. Tickle's arms, Mr. Nosy's nose, and Mr. Greedy's tummy. He smiled. And then he looked at his legs, those very, very, very long legs of his.
All the better for walking.
He chuckled and walked home in 4 minutes. 40 miles? Mr. Small came out of the sea after his short swim.
And how am I going to get home?
So he set off walking all the way home. 40 miles. That was last year. He got home yesterday. The end.